We're making turkey tacos tonight, although I hate to break it to you, I already had some ground beef in my freezer, and to save money and time and to be logical and practical with what we already have, I'm going to be using ground beef actually for my tacos tonight, but it's the same method, same seasoning, same concept. I'll walk you through the turkey predominantly because that's what is on the recipe and hopefully what most people are using. So we're going to make our own taco seasoning mix, and that's really key about making your own tacos. Those little packets are flavorful, but I'm sure Melody knows more than I do. They are full of things that we probably don't really want to put into our body, mostly the salt level. So we're going to be making our own spice mix. We're going to be searing our meat and getting it all flavorful and delicious. We have a bunch of toppings to prepare if you, depending on what you and your family like. That's also the fun thing about family taco night is you get to have whatever you guys really enjoy as a family, whatever different people like. Setting up a whole taco bar, as we call it in the biz, is the fun way to get everybody involved in kind of making their own food and interacting with the process. And then everyone can kind of have things the way they like it. So different toppings that I'm going to be using today, I've got, we're going to be making our own salsa, which is fantastic. Again, making things for yourself goes a long way to knowing what's inside of it and making it the way that you like it. And then we're going to be preparing different toppings. I have got some sour cream, some lettuce, some cheddar cheese. I'm going to be cutting some tomatoes, limes, and avocado. All of these are suggestions. All of these things are kind of whatever floats your boat. And you can always add things in or take things out. If there's other veggies you like, bell peppers would be great. Chopped green onions I'm going to add on as a garnish. That's not even on here, but I'm throwing them in a vase, so why not? And you can definitely, I really recommend making the healthier choice of all of the different vegetables. Iceberg, we'll talk about, I'm sure, is not, you could get a better lettuce for yourself probably. So a romaine or a darker leaf green, Melody will let us know. Sour cream, not the best option. If you have Greek yogurt, you can make almost the same exact dips and toppings for your tacos using Greek yogurt, and we can talk about the differences there in nutrition and health. I'm using things that I have because sort of that's the world we're living in. Why go to the store if I don't have to? So methods here are going to be really the key things we're focusing on today. None of this is complex or complicated, but all of these things are really good for young cooks to learn how to do by themselves because they are just key survival skills here. So learning how to make a salsa is just translate it into making other things once you kind of know how to safely chop tomatoes and onions. That's a really helpful skill, learning how to saute ground meat and knowing what to look for when it's cooked and how to deal with that in the seasoning process. You can do it very safely, so even young kids can be involved in that process. So these are really helpful things for everybody to get involved with in the family. So you can make it together, you can set up your bar together, and then you can eat it together. It's a lot of fun. Other things that you can definitely make adjustments on are the tortillas. Going with corn is always a little bit healthier because it's the whole grain, right, Melody? Mm-hmm. Yep. They do sell small little flour tortillas at the stores these days. They're what's called street taco kinds. If you have someone in your family that just really, really has to have flour tortillas, having them smaller than those giant burrito size, I would imagine would be a little bit better of an option. So I've got a couple of those going here today just to show you the different options and heating techniques that we're going to use to warm the tortillas up. The recipe gives directions on how to heat them up in the microwave, which is a really safe and effective way of doing it because someone can help do that while other things are happening. And then they stay warm, wrapped up in their paper towel or towel, and you can just sort of set them aside. I'm also going to demonstrate how to do them in a skillet, just like a dry skillet. You can warm them up on both sides using a little spatula or pair of tongs. So I'm going to demonstrate both of those methods as well, just so you can all learn them and start to get comfortable with making your own tacos. We are not going to be frying crispy taco shells. That is very American. That's not a traditional, authentic, really kind of a taco thing. So we're sticking with the soft tacos. It's definitely more authentic and it's a lot better for us. So If there's somebody in your family that absolutely has to have crunchy tacos, then making them yourself is a better way than buying those pre-packaged ones. So you can air fry them if you happen to have an air fryer, or you can just lightly cook them in a very shallow layer of a healthy oil like canola oil just on one side, and then you kind of fold it and do the next side. But it's never going to be as hard and crunchy as the kind they commercially mass produce. That's a special deep frying factory process that is kind of hard to duplicate in real life, which says something. So if you do really need crispy tacos in your life, then we can talk about how to make those. I'm happy to help. But we're going to stick with the soft today. It's actually a way more authentic version of, especially like a street taco. So that is what we're working with. So I've got my topping stuff here. We're going to do that in a minute. First, we're going to make our seasoning mix so that we can just set that aside. It is very straightforward, but it's a lot of different seasonings and flavors. We've got chili powder, which I use New Mexico ground chili powder. It is a spicy red chili powder. You don't have to use a very spicy New Mexico chili. California chili powder is a little bit milder, but still has really good chili powder flavor. And then there's just what is commercially called chili powder, which is a blend. So that is also very, very good for this process. You can use ancho chili powder, whatever flavors you really like. And the more you cook, the more you get to play around with different spices that you learn about for yourself. So we're going with 2 tablespoons of chili powder. I keep my chili powder in my little caddy here because I use it so much when I cook. It's one of the 4 seasonings that I have like at my disposal all the time. It goes a long way to making things taste very, very flavorful. Well, not really adding anything bad, right?
In taco season? In
chili powder, right? Like the basic seasonings are.
Yeah. The only seasonings that are maybe not so great for your health, I would say, would be anything with the word salt in it. So garlic salt, celery salt, onion salt, regular table salt. But other than that, all the other spices are good to go. So
awesome. That's really good to reinforce. That's great.
And chili powder also could help if you're really congested too. That's a nice one. Or paprika that like really opens up your sinuses. So that's actually another added benefit.
That is a super bonus. I love when that happens when I eat something spicy. I'm like, oh, it's so much clearer.
Sudafed. I got some chili powder.
Yeah, exactly. So I added 2 teaspoons of cumin to that also, just if you are keeping track. I've got a half a teaspoon of paprika, speaking of delicious, spicy, sinus clearing paprika. The next one is salt. That is the one thing. We're only adding 1 teaspoon of salt to this whole spice mix.
That's great.
And that goes a long way. I don't know what the normal sodium content for like a seasoning packet is.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm trying to think if I have one here that I can kind of look at. I don't think I do though. I can try to look it up and see.
They're higher in sodium though, we know that, right?
Yeah, for sure, than what you're using. I could look it up right now and see if I find anything.
So that's 1 teaspoon of the salt. I'm using kosher salt. If you have sea salt or table salt, that's also fine. You might use a little bit less just because it's a smaller grain, but it won't make too much of a difference in the long run, that tiny bit, if you're just using 1 teaspoon. I'm doing a half a teaspoon of garlic powder, definitely not garlic salt. We've already got our salt. Garlic powder, the same thing, the onion powder. You notice that some of my spices are all in different containers. These bags are definitely the cheapest, so I always try to find any spice in a bag that I can find, and then I just add in my own little jars. But sometimes the big bulk containers are more practical cost-wise if you know you use a lot of it, and I use a lot of garlic powder in my life, so. That's how I
do you know McCormick, the brand?
Yeah.
Okay. So they make a lot of spices. So the McCormick taco seasoning original blend, if you just use 2 teaspoons, which is very small, it's 380 milligrams of sodium in just 2 teaspoons. So you're using 1 teaspoon, right, for the whole thing? Okay. Yeah.
Well, that's great.
It's
really good to know because we're still going to have tons of flavor. You're not going to be missing anything. That salt those tend to be a little salty to me, and I think it's to help preserve them and make them last a really long time on the shelf. It's you know, one of the things. So I've got onion powder in there, and then that was just my dried oregano, which is really a key ingredient in a lot of taco flavors and other Tex-Mex food and Mexican food. And then the last one I'm adding is cayenne, and it says a pinch. That is definitely personal. Cayenne, of all of the different chili powders that we've talked about, cayenne is spicy. It adds a kick to your food more than any of these other ones do. So it's really personal to you and your family how much spice level you like. If you don't like really spicy food, or you want to balance your spice out by using hot sauce at the end, then don't use the cayenne. If anybody in your family is like really too sensitive to it, if you all really like spicy food, then I'm going for about 1/8 of a teaspoon. So like half of that 1/4 teaspoon into there to mix into all of the other spices. And that is, I lost my little plastic top. Oh well. All right, so that is our spice blend. You want to make sure that it's really well combined. I have my adorable tiny whisk. Just mix it up really well so that when we mix it into our meat when we're sauteing it, we don't have just like one chunk of chili powder in one section and all the oregano in the other. That will make it much harder to mix as we get cooking. So you want to mix it now. So that smells amazing. Much better than those packets, I think, that have been sitting there for who knows how long. It smells very fresh and bright and flavorful. I'm going to just set it aside so nothing happens to it while I prep out some of my toppings. I want to get the toppings made now because when we start to cook our meat and then our tortillas, we don't really want to then have to stop and cut a bunch of tomatoes and lettuce because our food's going to get cold. So want to get all of your things prepared that you need to have prepared. So depending on what toppings you all are making or having, now is the time. I'm going to just walk through a couple of cutting things. I'm going to put some things in bowls. And we're also going to be making our salsa at this point, just because having all of this done is going to get us ahead of the game. So I have got some adorable little containers because when you set up a taco station, you want to make it fun and pretty for yourself and your family. This is really a fun thing to do for birthday parties. Then everybody can make their own stuff and kind of have all their own toppings and go sit down and play. So I'm doing just a little bit of sour cream. I don't need to put a lot of food out because it's just me, so I don't want to waste it, but I do want to show you what an example would look like. Say just a little bit of sour cream here. I'm going to just put cheese out. I'm going to put some avocado out. Some of these things require me to cut them though, so I want to demo that to you. Obviously there's safe ways and unsafe ways of cutting everything. So you want to make sure that you know the safe way to do all of these things. I know we've done some stuff before, but it's good review as we're getting down to the end of the quarter together. We can go over some of the most important things that we've learned and make some really yummy food here. So I've got those. That's done just because that's the easiest thing to get done. Set that aside. I'm going to cut my tomatoes, lettuce, and avocado here. So avocado, one of the more common ways to hurt yourself when you're using a knife. So it's very important to remember the most important thing, which is to always leave it on the cutting board. We did this way back when we made guacamole, and that was at the very beginning, and now we're at towards the very end, and so it's a really good refresher to remember how to be safe when we're doing avocados. If you weren't with us in that class, then this is even better. On the cutting board at all times. If you pick it up in your hand and try to do things with it, you're much more likely to hurt yourself. When it's on that cutting board, you want to always know where the fingers of your guide hand are. They might not always be in a claw in this situation. We might have to hold it like this or even kind of like that at certain points, but just being very aware of where your fingers are at all times is really important while we do this. I'm going to use that hand to hold it steadily onto the cutting board while taking my knife into the stem. And then as soon as I hit the pit, I'm going to stop. I don't want to use a lot of force. I don't want to push too hard. I don't want to slide through that pit. Anything could happen. So once I hit the pit, I gently stop my knife, and then I'm going to turn the avocado around on the blade of the knife. Okay, and that cuts it in half. Oh, I have a hard avocado here. It's not coming off. There we go. Oh, no, it's perfect. Okay, so you have that open. Now, the safest thing to do is to use your fingertips to pry the pit out, or a spoon. It usually comes out either way with your fingers or with a spoon, just like that. Try to pry from the base and pull it up, and it comes right out. Some chefs use their knife to do that, and I do not recommend that you do that. So I'm not even going to show you how they do that. Very dangerous. Always leave it on the board. Use your fingers to pull the pit out. Use a spoon if you can't get it out with your fingers. And I have a little bruise section here. You can see that little black section. It's not rot. I can tell. It's just a bruise. So I'm going to just cut it away. And then I have my ready-to-go avocado, which you want to use a spoon to then scrape it out from inside the peel. You just run your spoon all the way around the edge, getting into the avocado. And, oh, this came off a tree. This is a really good real avocado. Okay. Spin it all the way around so you can scoop it out of the shell. That spoon should be able to scoop it right out. This is a little less ripe than I would like. Oh. You can also sometimes just peel the peel right off the top. Depends on the ripeness of your avocados. The more ripe they are, the easier the skin will be to remove. Kind of trap. There we go. The less ripe the avocado, the harder it will be to come off. This is maybe 1 day away from being perfect. Avocados are so finicky. It seems like you wait, nope, it's not ready, and then, oh, it's too ready. Very interesting. So once I've got the peel off, all I'm going to do for this is slice it. That's why I didn't make chunks of it first. If you wanted to make guacamole, you can always kind of pre-score the avocado while it's in its shell, but that's not necessary. Scooping it out of the shell and then cutting it. I'm just going to cut it into little slices and wedges to garnish at the end. If you don't, oh, I'm sorry about that. Okay. If you don't want your avocados to turn black or brown, after you cut them, they will start to oxidize. That's just what happens when they react to the oxygen in the air. And so they turn a little bit brown. There's nothing wrong with them at that point, but if you don't want that to happen just because of the look of it, then you use a little tiny squeeze of lime or lemon, any kind of acid that will stop it from turning completely brown. So I'm just going to do that right here on my cutting board. Get a little bit of lime juice poured over a very juicy lime. And kind of toss the avocado with the bit of lime so that it doesn't turn black while I'm preparing the rest of the food. So that is also a trick if you're making guacamole or other things with avocados, but you're not quite ready to mix it yet. You can always just soak it with a little bit of acid, and then it will keep itself from getting all messed up while you're waiting. All right. Cutting up some of these little tiny tomatoes, I'm going to use a serrated knife. Using a knife with teeth on it is always the best bet when you're cutting tomatoes. If you have a big bread knife, that's fine. Depending on the size of your tomatoes, I'm going to use a little serrated knife just because I've got little Roma tomatoes here. I like to use Roma tomatoes for salsa and taco toppings because they have a lot less water than like a big hothouse red tomato or those beefsteak tomatoes. They have a lot of juice in them sometimes, and I don't want that all over my taco. I just kind of want the nice diced tomato, so I find Romas are good for that. And so I'm using my serrated knife, cutting through the middle of the tomato, and then I want to turn it over onto that flat side. Anything that you're cutting, whether it has a round side or a flat side, you want to keep it on the flat side where it's nice and safe. It's not going to move on you while you're trying to cut it. So I've got my 2 little tomatoes cut in half. This is just going to be for diced tomato topping. From this point, it depends on the size of your tomato. You might need to cut this again in smaller little pieces if you want really small dice. But to get anything into a dice, what you do first is you cut your slice, which is also called a plank, See how it just looks like a slice of the tomato. And then you can cut your planks into sticks. In French, they call it a bâton. Once you've cut those down into sticks, you cut your sticks into dices, which is tiny little squares. So you've got nice little small chopped tomato to go on top of your tacos. Looks really pretty when you do it nice and clean cut like that. If you have different colored tomatoes like I do, again, that just goes a long way to making things look really nice. And I'm not sure, actually, do different colored tomatoes have different properties, nutritional?
No, they all are pretty much the same. They have the vitamin C, the lycopene, immune supporting nutrients, good for your eyes. But yeah, no, it's not. And even with bell peppers too, the colors, it's all about the same for nutrition value. Good question though.
Really good to know. All right, so I've got just very nice small little diced tomato to go on top. That's just another garnish that you could provide. I'm gonna put these into one of my little dishes here. Again, just to make it nice. Gotta look good for pictures, but also, we talked about this, the more you think about the presentation of your food, the more you're gonna be excited to eat it.
Mm-hmm.
So, our diced tomatoes. The last thing that I'm gonna do for this little platter of toppings is some chopped lettuce. And I do wanna talk about how iceberg is probably not the best bet in terms of a nutritional value, right, Melody?
Yeah, that is correct. They're mostly water, not very high in many nutrients compared to things like spinach, kale, you know.
And all of those are really good options to substitute in your tacos. That's a great way to kind of sneak in some dark leafy greens into dishes, because you still is going to taste like taco, but if you chop up some baby spinach or chop up some kale, and even if you're mixing that into a romaine lettuce, which is a nice darker green, right, that would be a much healthier taco topping than just plain iceberg. Iceberg isn't going to hurt you, it's just not going to help you in the ways that other foods could.
It's more for the texture, the crunch.
Yeah. And so if that's really important to you, then adding like a little bit of hearts of romaine, which still has a high water content, but those romaine leaves have a little bit more of the dark leafy green thing going on. Or you could even just mix in a small amount of iceberg if that's important to get that crunch, but adding in those other greens are going to go a long way. And it really is, you're just sneaking them in there. You won't taste them. But any of the lettuces, I cut that out and I removed, from this side, I removed the core. You want to always kind of cut that out of whatever lettuce you're using. Any head of lettuce is going to have a pretty tough fibrous core that you need to remove before you start shredding or chopping. I am going to use the multiple layers of this lettuce to help me. That really makes shredding things easy. I can just cut it in half and you see all those nice kind of layers. So I'm just going to chop that very, very thin all the way across. This time I definitely need to use my claw. I want to keep my fingertips very safe and tucked underneath. And I use them as a guide so I can keep my slices very thin. So I just move my fingers a little bit back each time. And then I'm shredding my lettuce nice and super thin, but my fingertips are still very safe and out of the way. You can use a serrated knife for this, or one of those safety knives that cuts lettuce. There's even lettuce knives, which are very, very safe. So definitely almost anyone in the family can help with this process. Keeping those fingertips back is the key. And then shredding it down nice and fine. If these are a little too long for your tacos, then you can just kind of cut it in half. Now you've got nice shredded lettuce. And again, mixing in some shredded spinach or kale would be a really, really nice mix in for both color and health. So I'm going to set this on this plate. I've got my avocados, my lettuce, cheese, tomatoes, sour cream. I'm going to make some delicious salsa now. Hi, Charlie. Okay, salsa. We've got onion, tomatoes, limes for juice. It calls for jalapeno, and again, that's very personal. If you don't want spicy stuff in your salsa, then leave out the chili peppers, leave out the jalapeno. You can have other kinds of peppers. There's serrano, which is a much smaller, skinnier green chili, and they are very spicy. really good if you like heat in your salsa. I'm actually going to be using chipotles, which is a smoked jalapeno. So what they do is they let jalapeno peppers ripen all the way on the bush so that they're red, and then they smoke them, and that's what a chipotle is. So I like the smoky flavor. I want that like depth to my salsa. It's kind of a little bit more of a, yeah, I can't really describe it other than smoky. It's got that extra campfire quality to the salsa, which I really like. You can get that quality in a roasted salsa. Sometimes they sell at stores like a roasted tomato salsa. A little bit more flavor going on once you cook something or smoke something. So I'm sticking with chipotle because, again, salsa is very personal. You can kind of use any spice factor or no spice factor. The tomatoes, onions, and lime, and if you're adding cilantro, that's a really traditional pico de gallo salsa, and it's great on tacos, so you can go that route also. If you don't want to make your own salsa and you have a jar of salsa in your fridge that you and your family loves, you can absolutely use that instead. I would assume there's probably a higher salt and maybe even a sugar content in those that you need to watch out for. That I'm not 100% sure though. A lot of authentic salsas are pretty much just the 5 ingredients that they are. So just look at the labels, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I've got my tomatoes. I'm probably not going to make this much salsa. For the salsa, I am not stressed about making them like nice, pretty little dices like I did for the taco, because I just want to get it in a bowl and marinating it all nice and chopped up as small as I can. So if you have a food processor or a chopper, or whatever those things from the 90s, the slap chop, anything like that, you could totally use it in this situation. I'm gonna use my big bread knife so I can kind of just rough chop. That's what we call that in the game. I want some rough chopped tomatoes. And I'm gonna just mix it right back here into this bowl. You notice, again, I'm using a couple different colors. It's just what I have, and it'll be really pretty on our plate. So use what you've got, use what you can find. It's no pressure on the tomato front. Any kind of tomato would work, especially for certain salsa. If you want that like blended restaurant quality salsa, you can just put all of it in a blender. That's the fastest and nicest way to make salsa. You just kind of put it all in the blender, and it comes together in that really nice blend that you get with your chips and salsa at the restaurant. But if you like a nice chunky salsa where you can kind of see the veggies, then you can do it this way. You can kind of go for middle ground where like it's a little rough chop and a little blended. We used to do that at a company I used to work for, where we would make it and then take half of it out, blend that up, and then mix it back in. So it was still kind of chunky and nice, but had the flavor really blended out and kind of mixed in really well that way. So making salsa is fun and easy. The word salsa literally just means sauce, which is not really what we think of, because salsa means something very specific to us. But this is a traditional tomato kind of a salsa. But lots of fun things when you actually get into the history and understanding of words and language when it comes to food. Kind of some fun lessons. I really enjoy looking into food history. It's really fun for me to think about tomatoes and peppers. A lot of the things that we're using here today, tomatoes and chilies, are native to Central and mostly South America. They grow, and North America, they grow very well here. Mostly Central and South, though, traditionally, before the Columbian Exchange. And so Italian food, what we think of as Italian food with all of those great hearty tomato sauces, they didn't have that until much later in their history. People were living in that part of the world for thousands and thousands of years before they even knew what a tomato was. Same thing with most chili peppers. They didn't make it around the world until later. So it's really kind of very fun way to learn about history and travel around the world by following food. So really rough chop, really just kind of slap together tomatoes for the salsa. The next ingredient is onion. You can use white or red. It really, or yellow. It doesn't matter. They are not interchangeable. I'm not trying to lie that they all taste the same. They don't. But they all go really well in salsa. So it's whatever you have. I'm using red because that's what I have. I would recommend either, though, a red or a white. So we're going to do a half a cup of that very small diced onion. So this was 2 cups of chopped tomatoes, and then half a cup of very small. So I've left the root end, the end with all the little hairy roots on it. You leave that attached. You cut the other end off so you have a nice flat side to work with, and then a flat side to work with. Like the avocado, you want to keep your hand nice and flat and splayed out so your fingertips are safe. And you're going to cut into the onion horizontally, but not all the way through. You want to leave that attached so it's like a Pac-Man. So then, using the lines of the onion, you cut around the onion into, again, not all the way back. I'm trying really hard to keep that root end intact. My knuckles bent, my claw nice and safe. Okay, once I've got my lines cut, then I cut across them into a teeny tiny little dice. And I've got my claw, and you just gently slide down that onion across those cuts you already made to get your nice tiny diced onion. As you get close to the root end, you're going to approach the end of your cuts. You kind of have to stop because they're not going to be chopped small anymore. And all you're left with there is that little bit of a root end, and that can go in your compost if you have compost, which is great. So a half a cup. See, that's water. This is 1 cup. Let's just fill that up halfway. I have some extra raw onion here I'm going to put on my garnish tray. Some people really like just plain chopped onion on their tacos. Really great, adds a lot of good pop of flavor. And then you definitely need to have your gum afterwards, but there you go. If you really like that traditional street taco topping, another great option is the chopped white onions with chopped cilantro. So you do about I have it on here. A half a cup of diced onion, and I suggest white for this, mixed with about a tablespoon of chopped cilantro. That's a good ratio of that traditional street taco topping, the onion and cilantro mix. And a lot of people really like that, so that's a great option. Half a cup of chopped onion into my 2 cups of chopped tomato. I'm going to add in the juice from 1 or 2 limes. It really depends on how limey you want yours and how juicy the limes are. You saw that first lime that I used to help soak the avocado. Barely any juice was coming out of it, but this one I can feel is very soft. So I think I'm going to get probably a tablespoon or 2 of juice out of this one. So I might only need 1 lime. That's why I put 1 to 2, because it varies so much. I'm going to just squeeze that in with my hand. If you have a juicer, that's great. You can protect any of your little paper cuts. And you really kind of need to make it to your preference. I like salsa to be very limey because I also don't like cilantro. I think we've talked about this. It tastes like soap to me. So to help balance and get more flavor and more kind of fresh brightness in my food when I'm missing that herb, because that herb adds a lot of bright freshness to most people. Not for me. So I add a little bit of extra lime, and that adds lots of flavor and bright freshness, and that makes me feel like I'm not missing anything this way.
And if you have extra lime, you can always use it to flavor your water too, so that way you get multi-uses out of it.
Yeah, I don't throw those away, because even the like, I know I didn't get all the juice out of it yet. There's still some flavor in there. And then once I have gotten out of all of it that I can, it goes down the garbage disposal because it makes the whole kitchen smell fantastic. Yeah, there's lots of uses for those lemon and lime peels. What else can you put in? Right, the jalapeno. If you're using jalapeno, then you would cut the whole pepper. but just probably for this much salsa, you would only use about half of it. So cut it, scoop out the seeds, and then cut your strips, and then dice your strips into teeny tiny minced jalapeno. I'm going to use chipotle, so I'm going to open up my little can. Chipotles come smoked, usually soaking in what is called adobo sauce, which is just a sauce made from adobo seasoning and the water, and I think a little bit of vinegar. Yeah, vinegar. So that sauce is not really what I'm going for in my salsa. I just want a teeny tiny bit of the chipotle itself. So it comes in a can. You can see it's in a salsa, but there's the pepper. That is the smoked, cooked, well, it was a jalapeno, and then in this form, it is a chipotle. So this stuff is spicy. This adobo sauce that's now on my fingertips, it's delicious and it's spicy. So if I were to accidentally get it close to my face or rub my eye or something, you want to be really careful. Any peppers that you're cutting, wearing gloves is a great idea, or if not, then as soon as you are finished cutting it, you put it where it needs to be, and then you take your hands and the knife you were just using over to the sink and wash them both before you do anything else. Too many mistakes, too many stories of people forgetting that they just cut jalapeno because somebody distracts them and then they rub their eye or cough or something, and it's very painful. So I'm just cutting that chipotle pepper into tiny strips one way, and then I'm mincing those strips the other way, which is exactly what you would do if it was a fresh whole jalapeno. And then I'm going to chop it up even more finely, just mincing it just because I want the flavor to spread out really well. And I also don't want to bite into a massive chunk of spicy pepper. Okay, so that's going to get spread out. It's kind of just like a pepper paste at this point, and it is delicious. So that's going to go in mine. If you're using jalapeno or serrano or any other chili, just make sure that it's really nice and finely minced up. Washing my hands very carefully. Okay. Now when you're making salsa, it's important to remember that you are almost always going to be serving it with chips or on top of other food that is seasoned. Our tacos are going to be seasoned. The tacos mix has salt in it. The cheese has a little salt in it if you're using that. Even Greek yogurt, like there's seasoning already in a lot of our food. So be very careful about adding a lot of salt to a salsa. It's going to end up tasting over salty if you eat it with chips that have salt on it. So it's just something to always really remember. I'm looking for it. Where's my little, I thought I got this out. So I'm going to make sure that chipotle especially gets really well blended in and mixed up. The lime juice and the tomato water basically create the liquid, the foundation. The more it sits, the longer it sits here, then the more flavor it's all going to kind of break down and soak up together and be really, really, really yummy. Make sure that was it. Yeah, if you're adding in cilantro, now's your time. Salt, I wouldn't put very much salt. Pepper, you do want to add a little bit of pepper, especially if you like black pepper. That flavor is a particular flavor. Some people really like it. I'm going to put in about 5 grains of salt. Doesn't even count as a pinch of salt. It will help out bring out the natural flavors and sugars in the garden tomatoes, but almost insignificant. Okay, so that's going to set aside. We are coming down to the fun parts. All of this is ready. Salsa is ready to go. My toppings here, which we're going to set out nice and pretty in a minute. I want to clear some space just because I'm going to move the camera now. As we start to cook the meat and get our tortillas warmed up, that's the last step in this taco situation. I want to be able to maneuver the camera here for you guys. Move this cutting board. So I might not have ever mentioned this in this class, But just as a little aside, these two little things right there that you can see on my station is what we call our work areas, our station in the kitchen. This is folded pieces of shelf paper. You can get those rolls of shelf paper at the 99-cent store that like you line your drawers with them and different things. I just cut off pieces and fold them up, and they keep my cutting board from moving and sliding on the surface of a tile or wood or metal counter, so that I don't have to use paper towels or wipes all the time, because that can be very destructive. But these things I can wash and then reuse, and they keep my cutting board nice and safe, so that when you're cutting things, your cutting board doesn't slide around, causing you to hurt yourself. So that's a fun trick, because those rolls last a really long time, and you just need to cut off a little bit at a time. And like I said, you can wash them just like with a sponge and dish soap. So they work great. So if you were wondering what that was, that's what that was. We are going to cook in a skillet. As usual, I'm going to be using my cast iron handy dandy skillet here, my trusty Lodge. Okay, I think that's good. Yeah. We want to get this heated up at a medium heat, pretty hot, so that it comes to a pretty high temperature. We're going to be sauteing hot. You don't want your ground meat to steam and get like all the water, especially ground turkey. The waters will kind of cook out, and it'll start to steam itself, and you'll get very gray ground meat, taco meat. You don't want that. So to avoid that, really high heat, get your pan nice and hot first. For ground turkey, you're going to want to use just like one burst of a canola oil cooking spray, any kind of pan spray. Or if you just have regular canola oil, that's great. Because turkey meat, which is why it's a really great option, has very low fat content, especially if you get the leaner the better. So you do need a touch of a healthy cooking oil in the pan just to keep it from sticking too much. But just enough to coat the pan. You don't want like a pool of it in any way whatsoever, just enough so that the bottom of the pan is coated and ready. Because then as the turkey continues to cook, it will unstick itself. It will caramelize and it will cook. But if it's a dry pan to start out with, then unless it's a really good nonstick, it might kind of stick and burn, and you have to scrape and do some annoying stuff. So just a very light coating of a little bit of canola oil, or even extra virgin olive oil would work fine. Just keep it on the healthier side. And then I'm using, like I said, I'm using that ground beef, so I'm not going to add any, because this has, I'm sure Melody can tell us why is turkey such a better option for something like this?
It is lower in saturated fat, which is unhealthy fat. And yeah, the leaner, the better for sure. Obviously, less saturated fat, but also reduces cooking time, because the less fat you have, the less you have to kind of get through to cook it. So if you're in a rush or a weeknight, when school resumes, it's a better option to go leaner.
Yeah, really, really, really good point about the cooking time. Mine is probably going to take a little longer than your batch if we're working together here, because mine has a higher fat content. I tried to get the leaner of the ground beef. I think it's the 85, but that's still not. I have a lot more fat to cook out than you will in your turkey. So I've got, get your pan nice and hot. If you are adding a little bit of canola oil, add it now and then get the oil hot again. You don't want to put the turkey into cold oil. So just, you're getting your pan prepped and ready for sauteing, just like we normally do. I'm going to use a pair of gloves and show you guys, when you're using ground meats, whether it's turkey, chicken, beef, pork, anything, it comes in this brick, and sometimes they're very condensed, and sometimes they're kind of looser, depends on the factory or the farm. You do want to break it up a little bit before you put it into the pan. You can just kind of flip this whole thing in there and just put the brick of meat on there, and it's going to sear one side, but then it's going to be really a lot more work for you to try to break it all up and get it all spread out. So doing that to start with, just taking it in your hands and kind of breaking it up, it helps so much in the cooking process. I know the turkey packets are usually, I'm not doing this whole thing because this was more than what the recipe calls for, more than your 12 ounces of turkey. Save that. something else on the recipe. Okay, now that that's in there, I'm going to leave it to create a good caramelization and surface cooking contact. You want to get it onto your hot pan and then leave it there. You don't want to stir it right away. If you stir it right away, then you're not going to get any caramelized searing effect. You want to get a searing effect, which is browning. That browning occurs when you leave the meat on the surface of the pan for, it doesn't take long. Once that sizzle basically goes down and it has kind of like, oh, that initial quick cook, then it has started to brown and cook. If I were to shake it up, it would be loose enough that it would start to move on its own. That means that the fats have rendered out and the surface area, the sugars have cooked, and so it is time to start stirring it and flipping it at that point. You want to make sure that you're stirring it really well and not getting any bits that stick, especially with turkey. If it looks like it's getting too dry and you don't have any fat rendering out to help with the sticking process, then maybe just another light spray. But once you get a good sear on one side, then you want to stir it up. At this point, all you're looking for is that it's not pink anymore. It's going to continue cooking. You're going to add water. Then you're going to add the spices, and then it's going to cook again later on with the apple cider. So it doesn't have to be 100% done right now. In fact, that will be very dry if you cook it to 100% right now. You're just looking for that initial, like, this was raw pink, so now this is hardly pink at all, okay? And then you're going to add in your seasoning and your half a cup of water, and we're going to let that cook for close to 10 minutes. Especially with turkey, this method really helps keep that a very juicy, moist taco meat by doing it this way. So I'm adding in my half a cup of water and my seasoning blend. Make sure that it gets well coated and mixed in.
I do want to clarify something earlier just to make sure it's clear, but when you 1 teaspoon of salt is the total amount of salt that is recommended for Americans for your entire day. However, Julia is making enough for not just one person, so you have to keep that in mind. But when I did earlier, I did look up that packet. It was 380 milligrams for just 2 tablespoons in the packet, but typically you're using an entire packet. So I think it's actually probably a little bit more than what you use, but maybe it is sort of equivalent to what you use. But you have to think that obviously not one person is eating all that. Everyone is, and that's the whole recipe. So
that's although that is really good to know. I feel like when I was a kid, they had 2 or 3 times the amount of salt content.
Because I think when you make it out of a packet, you dump the whole thing in, correct?
Yes, you do.
So I believe there's like 2 or 3 servings. So it's probably around the same that you're using.
Okay.
But yeah, just to clarify, yeah. But again, I mean, Julia's making enough for multiple servings. So even though it's all your added, your salt recommended for the day, if you're a healthy, person, then, but you're having 1/4 of the recipe, so it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay, that is good to know. That's important. And I can stop bad-mouthing McCormick quite as much.
Yeah. I mean, for just 2 teaspoons, that's a lot. But you have to think that someone's using the whole packet and is probably, hopefully, sharing that with someone else,
I hope. Yeah, I sure do. My grandmother used the packets a lot as a marinade, as seasoning. She made dips.
Oh, yeah, we did too, for sure.
Yeah. My family is, a lot of my family's from New Mexico, so that Tex-Mex green chili, blue corn thing. That feels like home for me. It's good.
Yeah, there you go.
I feel like making it yourself.
And you know what? It's still, even though, it's all your salt for the day for one person. I mean, you're still you're still controlling it by making as much stuff on your own anyway. So it's okay.
Yeah. Now this is going to be enough for me to eat for probably 3 days.
Right. Exactly.
So you cook this at about a medium to medium high heat. It says about 10 minutes, but it sort of depends. Like as I stir it, the more I stir it, the more the water evaporates. If you just kind of leave it and walk away, then it might take that full 10 minutes. But if you stir it the entire time, you're helping to move the water, which helps it to actually cook off faster. So you're kind of moving the meat out of the way, so I'm almost gone in terms of water here. Very, very cooked down and evaporated, which is great. I want to, at this point, add in my apple cider vinegar and brown sugar. I am using 1 tablespoon of the vinegar. This is going to give us a really good depth of savory flavor and a lot of good acid content without changing the flavor as much as adding in like a ton of lime or lemon. So 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, and then 1 teaspoon only of brown sugar. Make sure that it's a tight teaspoon, not mounded, not extra, just 1 teaspoon. Stir that in really well. What that is, basically, the apple cider vinegar and the brown sugar, you're creating a balance of flavors. There is a great documentary, well, the content of the documentary is great. Just to learn about how chefs are constantly looking for that balance of heat, salt, fat, acid, and I always put sugar into those. Those 5 things are what makes things taste good to us. If it has a well balance of all of those flavors, then it tastes better and richer and more delicious, even if you are using really, really healthy ingredients and items. So we've got our acid from the vinegar, we've got a little tiny bit of sugar, we've got salt, we have got our spice. It's a really well balanced dish. It even has the richness from a tiny bit of good fat content. If you're using turkey, you know, there's all of that balance is what you're always looking for, no matter what it is you're cooking, and whether you're making a nice and easy family taco night when the kids can help, or you get into much more advanced recipes, which I know you all will. Always thinking about that balance of those basic experiences that you feel when you eat different things. You know, tartness, saltiness, sweetness, little heat, all of those things really go a long way to making all of your food better. So I've turned that off. That is cooked through. I just cooked in the vinegar and sugar until it was really well mixed and combined. It was about a minute and a half. But I don't want to keep evaporating any more of the water. This has now really cooked and condensed to be kind of a thick, like a thick sloppy Joe material. If you have made that, it's very like compacted. There's no more water. It's not saucy. It is just this really well produced, flavorful compound. So that's what you're looking for with the turkey as well. When you add in the water and then after the vinegar and the sugar, you want to make sure that the liquid is cooked out, but that it's not really, really crumbly dry. You want it to have made a kind of a like a thick, pasty, delicious taco mix, using different adjectives to try to get you to understand the consistency without being able to come here and look right into my pan, but I hope that helps. We're going to do the tortillas next, and I'll show you the easiest way to do them is definitely in the microwave. You can just wrap up a few tortillas in a couple of paper towels, wrap them really well, and put them in the microwave for about 20 to 30 second bursts, you know, at a time. Just like heat it up for 30 seconds, see what they feel like, maybe flip the package over another 30 seconds. It won't take long in the microwave at all to get your tortillas warm. All you're going for is warm and bendy. You want them to be flexible and pliable so that when you put your taco stuff inside of them, they don't crack in half and break and all your stuff falls all over the floor. So that's especially important with corn tortillas. A cold corn tortilla is not very palatable. It doesn't taste, I mean, it tastes fine, but it doesn't feel very good. The mouth feels not that fun. And it will break. It will absolutely break, and then your taco is now just taco salad on your plate, which is also perfectly fine if that's the route you want to go. taco salad is delicious. And that is one of my favorite ways to get lots of dark leafy greens, which are not easy for me to eat because they're very bitter, but lots of spinach and lots of kale chopped up, covered in taco seasoning and corn and black beans and tomatoes and salsa. It doesn't matter what that spinach tastes like anymore. I can't tell. There's so much other good stuff going on, and that's how I have to sneak it into my life because I never grew out of those bitter taste things. They're very difficult for me to eat. So it makes it nice to cook because I can taste everything really well, but I have to find ways to kind of sneak healthy foods into my diet like we all do sometimes with our kids. Well, when I was a kid, that was always a struggle for my parents. So the method in the microwave, like I said, the real only important thing is that when you wrap it in a paper towel, or you can use a clean lint-free towel if you have those kind of linen towels that don't have terry cloth lint on them, then use a clean towel because then you're not wasting paper. That's great. The important thing, though, is making sure that it is completely wrapped, not just like that because air is going to come out the sides, but completely folded over so that it's in a nice pocket of paper towels and it gets real steamy inside there in the microwave, and then you're good to go. You just leave them in the paper towels until it's time to make your tacos. This is the way that I like to do it just because I'm usually only making 1 or 2 tortillas at a time for myself. And so getting out your nice nonstick pan or even just any skillet will work. You don't need any fat. No pan spray, no oil. We're doing just a warm up on these. We're not frying them. So the flour and the corn, it'll be the same. They'll just, probably one will cook faster than the other. But once you get your pan hot, definitely want to have parents help by making sure that everything is safe and ready to go. But once it's hot, then you just put your tortilla into the pan. This is the simplest and most easy thing you can do. Once it starts to warm up on one side, then it will start to become softer and easier to work with. You can flip it. It'll start to warm itself on the other side. I'm using tongs, but I'm being very careful because these are metal tongs. And this is my nice nonstick pan. So this is technically what I'm doing. This is blasphemy in the kitchen. This is not what you want to do. If you're using your good nonstick pan, use a utensil that is not going to scratch it. Metal tongs, you might accidentally scratch your nonstick pan, and then the nonstick quality really starts to erode after that. It's not as good for cooking your eggs in things. So you want to be very careful if you're using metal tongs in a nonstick pan. So I'm going to flip that again. I've now gotten it warmed on both sides and just making sure that it's still nice and hot. You can tell this is a cold tortilla. If I were to fold this, it's already cracking in the middle. So that is not going to, all my stuff's going to break out and I'm going to have a hole in my taco. Bummer. But this one, nice and warm, just folds right in half. No breaking, no bending, no, it's perfect. So that's what warming it up does. It makes it nice and flexible and pliable. We've talked about this, how my hands are very desensitized to heat because of my experience in the kitchen. So I'm telling you not to do what I'm doing at home. Use those tongs. Use a spatula. Make sure that you don't hurt yourself. That is the easiest way to do this, using a little spatula or a pair of tongs to just grab it on one edge and gently flip it over. It's the exact same process with the flour. If you're using any kind of flour tortillas, it's just that those are much thicker and they're going to take a little bit more time to get warm. They also won't crack nearly as much if you were to fold it up and make a soft taco out of this. You could eat it cold. Not as good that way though. Just not nearly as pleasant. So warming it up a little bit in advance makes then putting in your nice hot taco meat. Eating a cold tortilla around a hot taco would be a little off-putting. Definitely doable if you just need to eat to survive. It's fine. But taking a couple extra seconds to warm up your tortilla goes a long way. So we have got warm tortillas on our plate. I'm gonna set this here. Now we are just about a minute over here, guys. All we're doing is laying out our foods, though, now at this point. This is the best part. Got your station set, different tortillas and toppings. We're going to set out our garnishes with our salsa. I'm going to put into this cool bowl here. My chipotle salsa, and then you want to put another dish in and put your taco seasoning. So, taco night, as long as you have everybody helping, which is really fun for everyone, then you can get this all set up and ready in about half an hour. You know, if like you've got your stuff cut, you've got your, someone can make salsa, someone can shred lettuce, someone can help warm tortillas in the microwave while someone is cooking the taco meat, and dinner is served. Really straightforward and simple, but then everyone can have the things that they like. I would end up making tortilla, taco meat, and that is 3 teaspoons, so that equals 1 tablespoon of taco meat on one little taco. Tons of flavor, all kinds of goodness. Little bit of shredded lettuce, some onions, some tomatoes, wee bit of cheese. Just one example. So you can make a lot of really delicious versions of this, however everybody in the family likes to have them. The corn is great just as a whole grain option. It's really, really great. And when you soften it up like this, it doesn't, it's, that's okay.
So, I made my turkey and I did a little bit of other stuff, and I'm gonna make my, what's it called?
Oh, we're gonna do the toppings bar.
We're gonna do the toppings bar later
Nice.
when it's closer to dinner time, because we're gonna have this for dinner.
Oh, that is such a great idea. I'm excited for you. Will you send us pictures when you make your whole taco bar?
Yep.
Our whole taco what?
When
My sound accidentally turned off somehow.
Uh-oh. I was just asking, when you get your whole taco bar set up, maybe send us a picture. We would love to see it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I think I'm gonna try to do that. I'm not sure how.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Awesome. Awesome job. Thanks for playing along. Thanks for cooking. If anybody has any questions about any of the stuff that I talked about or did, or any of the awesome tips that Melody always gives us, you can type them in or send us an email. I know you've been keeping track on all of this. So.
Yeah, there's no questions, just.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I have a client at 4:15, so I will have to.
Oh, yeah. No, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Melody, I will talk to you very soon.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I mean,
Thank
taco night is done. Yeah.
Yay, looks delicious.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you.
Thanks for joining us.